pride comes before a fall. It's an old saying, and pride is also a biblical sin. So what is it about pride that means that one man's pride can equal the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people? Can it really be that simple? Is, for example, what's happening in Israel now, what's happening in Ukraine, and many of these other disputes that are going on, could it actually be down to the pride of one individual? It's a horrifying thought in a way, but it kind of ties in with the idea that there is a sort of psychological aberration in man that you don't see in other animals. You must have read in the newspapers from time to time about a very small dispute that happens between two neighbours. It's normally over a garden fence or a hedge or a tree that's overhanging. It's really something as simple as that. It may be that one party is complaining that there's 1 inch intrusion onto their territory, garden, and that this dispute can go on for years and years and years, often ending up with the police involved and in an expensive court case. There are examples of people who have lost everything because their legal bills were so high on a very, very marginal dispute over the placing of a hedge, a garden fence, or an overhanging tree. They have been prepared to lose absolutely everything, or let's say that losing everything has been a consequence of their inability to compromise, to make peace, to deal with it in some other way. And I suppose you could say that that's pride and ego. But it's a hell of a price to pay, isn't it? And yet we pay it. Now, there are examples of situations where this has got out of hand. A simple little thing's got out of hand and it's caused a national dispute. So, for example, there was the case in 1999, India against Pakistan. You know that these countries have a very difficult relationship, but there is a kind of uninhabited, mountainous, sort of snow-peaked district which has absolutely no sort of territorial advantage, where there was a minor incursion by Pakistan. Pakistan denied it, and they said that it was a kind of a localized thing. But nevertheless, it led ultimately to the deaths of over 1,000 soldiers and a lot of nuclear saber rattling. This was something else that had got completely out of hand. And another example is from what's known as the Pig War in 1859. This is where I think there was, on an island outside Vancouver, a British pig apparently ate some vegetables of an American farmer on the island, and the American shot the pig. And before long, this had escalated into a very serious diplomatic problem, and battleships were in place, and it got extremely. There was an extremely long period of negotiation. I think it took 12 years for a sort of settlement that came from this simple point of the pig eating somebody's vegetables. It took 12 years of diplomatic negotiations to resolve the matter. So lots of examples from the sort of micro neighbourly dispute right up until national territory disputes, which clearly evoke the idea that pride is at the heart of this, and why is it that people won't compromise, won't back down? It's an interesting question, because of course if compromise was, I mean, Trump is meeting with Putin shortly this week, I think, but it's not really about territory, is it? Not really. There's something else going on, and I'm wondering how much of this is simply to do with this problem that one's ego, one's pride, if you like, is kind of a solid, fixed thing which you cannot let fragment, otherwise it will feel like you yourself have died. That there is some sort of zero-sum game going on, whereby if you give an inch, then it's you who has lost something. You've lost an inch, but that inch is essential to your ego. So could it be that all of this catastrophe that's gone on right now and all through history is at the heart of it an issue of pride, an issue of maintaining a kind of totality of ego that, if cracked, means a kind of personal annihilation. And you know, it's a strange thing. This is why we have a thing called arbitration, I guess. But the thing about arbitration is that it has to have some kind of basis around it, which means that it can kind of force an issue to some extent, because people will not relinquish often what they feel is right, what they have justified in their soul, very easily. So yeah, these small disputes and these national disputes, they're kind of very similar in a way. I mean, there are lots of theories of war and how they start and why they go on and why they can't easily be stopped. I would kind of summarize a lot of those as saying that a lot of this is never about kind of territory per se. It's much deeper than that. It's to do with a sense of identity, senses of entitlement, senses of superiority, a sense of also overconfidence, the idea that you perhaps in the past have been able to be bullish in circumstances, and that has satisfied the aggressive instinct. You've been able to go and rearrange the cosmos, if you like, in your own vision. And from time to time, this gets difficult, and somebody else's vision is not the same as yours, and the power there's more equilibrium of power, and then you have a conflict that can't really be resolved. Now, of course, these things can easily be resolved. You know, I mean, everybody knows how to resolve most of these conflicts. We can kind of see it, just as, you know, even if you're down the pub, you can kind of work it out. If the parties were able to deal with their self-identity issues, which is wrapped up with their pride and ego. And even the Greek philosophers were talking 2,000 years ago about how one could organize a society so that it was stable and free from aggression, and that there would be various principles involved that everybody would share. So we kind of had a blueprint, but it doesn't work. And this is why I think it's probably some psychological aberration. And pride, which is, as I said, it's the biblical sin, and there's a very famous phrase, pride before a fall. In other words, you can be as proud as you like, but you'll end up with probably without a relationship, without friends, possibly without a job, bankrupt, kind of in a corner. And even then, you might still be thinking, I did the right thing. I did the right thing. You know, I did not let my sense of identity, my ego, my pride take a fall here. It's a strange thing, isn't it? I think so. Yeah, so there's this thing called loss of face, isn't it? Loss of face. Imagine, if you become, your face is either because you have conceded in something, you're almost being wiped off the face of the map. You're being annihilated. You've got now this blank face. You've got a blank face. What are you? You're a nobody. So here you are. You're a somebody in the world. You're a somebody who has kind of your own personal principles and ideas of right and wrong and what have you. And it's challenged and you cannot let go of it. Not even the smallest compromise. Even the smallest compromise means that you have given something of yourself to someone else. It's eating away at you. It's peculiar. It's admitting defeat, isn't it? It's I am defeated in some way. The head goes down, the shoulders fall. You've been defeated. But can you not compromise and consider it a victory of some sort? If you look at it on the longer time scale, by compromising and even sort of admitting that you're not always right, if you like, you're saving yourself from becoming that person I just described, that person in the corner of the room, the furniture's gone, you'd be bankrupted, the wife's walked out, the husband's walked out, friends don't want to know you, family are sick of you because of your self-righteous pride. So by making that little compromise earlier on, I would say that kind of makes you into a kind of highly super intelligent heroic figure. But it doesn't feel like that at the time, does it? I mean, it's not easy. I understand this is not easy. I mean, I think that you'd have to be pretty transcendent as a human being to be able to let people, in a way, sort of, it feels like, get the better of you so that you have a much easier path through life. But, it is a choice. And as always, you must accept the consequences of every single action you take. And people don't really think too much about the consequences of everything they do and they say, but there generally are consequences. So once you've started on a program like Putin has, for example, or like Netanyahu has, it's very, very difficult to pull back from that because you've asserted your identity into the cosmos, into somewhere else. Instead of just saying, this is who we are and we're kind of happy where we are, you've taken a step and made your identity vulnerable if you don't win. So the whole thing becomes existential. It's about your existence. And I think if you go through life with this idea that you cannot be, no, that doesn't work in sense. And I guess also there is the idea that if you give an inch, if you allow a crack, if you compromise, which is meant to be, by the way, it's meant to be a virtue. It's certainly a Christian virtue. We would call that being humble, really. That would be the kind of opposite, wouldn't it, of walking around full of pride. There's this idea that if you crack, then somehow you will forever be taken advantage of. That somehow you will be seen to be a weak and vulnerable entity, person, nation going forward. And yeah. So, why do these things go on for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years? I think probably it's because the more they go on, the harder it is to compromise, to relinquish your your sense of justice for yourself. It kind of hardens. You cannot walk away from it. I think that if there is going to be a negotiation, a compromise, a kind of softening of the dispute, where you could, well, in a neighbourly dispute, you could almost laugh at it at the beginning, but certainly at the beginning of a major conflict, like in Ukraine, you can de-escalate it quite quickly without any side feeling that they have somehow betrayed themselves and their identity. If it happens very quickly, the longer it goes on, I think the harder it becomes. And this is the situation we're probably in at the moment. My final thoughts really are that I think this compromise idea, although we can clearly see how practical it would be, how easy it would be, how sensible it would be, how expedient it would be, it's obvious, and we could save, 50,000 lives at the same time. It's not that easy because in reality, I think that you're in an existential battle for yourself. You feel that you are losing something. You're losing, it's nothing to do with territory, losing part of yourself, losing part of your national identity, losing your status, either as an individual or on the world stage. And we know how important status is and hierarchy. I mean, as human beings, we feel that if we've been demoted in some way, then, we kind of feel that. We can't easily shrug that off and get on with our day if we've been demeaned in some way. It's, it really affects something right deep inside us. And also, somehow we feel in danger to an extent if we give in too easily or at all, that somehow our security is threatened if we stop this egotistical ring of pride, which we kind of need as a kind of buffer somehow. And I think that that's really what's going on at the moment. And it doesn't matter whether or not we're dealing with, what's happening in the world at the moment, particularly in Ukraine or in Israel, but also if we're dealing with a neighbourly dispute. I think it stems from exactly the same thing, and it is a kind of, as I said, it is a psychological aberration. It's another sort of failing of humankind, where we just can't give in because of our pride. And we're prepared to fall. We are actually prepared to fall. We're prepared to end up in the gutter in order to maintain that sense of pride. If we could find it in ourselves, to not worry too much about that, because in the long run, we're protecting ourselves, then I think the world would be a completely different place. But it isn't, and we have to live in the world as it really is.